Welcome to the Bald Brad Show. In today's episode, we're covering a variety of hot button issues, from Joe Biden's Department of Defense saying a trans soldier inspires us all, to Texas Christian University offering drag classes as academic credit. We got updates on Bud Light as well as updates on the recent Supreme Court decisions on affirmative action and Joe Biden's student debt forgiveness plan. We're going to give you all the details today. Before we jump into any of it, support a true American patriot by hitting that like and subscribe button. Leave us a short, sweet comment down below. Speaking of down below, go to any of the links in the description section and get yourself a copy of our book, Trojan Horse, How the Left is Destroying America. You're seeing it in real time. It is a timely book. It's a good book. It's a great gift for you, family member, aunt, uncle, Democrat, or independent that needs the truth spoken to them or needs to be red-pilled. Get yourself a copy today. And also head over to baldbrad.com. Get yourself some merchandise, t-shirts, hoodies, or Bald Brad Show mugs with our logo on the front and the American flag on the back. Look, folks, coffee never tasted better drinking out of this patriotic mug. Get yourself a mug today. And also, speaking of patriotism, we got an awesome patriotic group in our community, folks. They're in the live chat. They're in the comment section. How do you join? Well, you just hit the join tab right there. Become a member today. Become a true American patriot. I would love to have you. They would love to have you. Join us today. With that being said, we got a jam-packed show for you. Social media erupts as Biden's Department of Defense says trans soldier inspires us all. 2 days before 4th of July, the Biden administration's woke Department of Defense celebrated a male U.S. Army major who has decided he is female, declaring the man's journey inspires us all. Do you feel inspired, folks? Do you feel uplifted of this man's journey? Major Rachel Jones, a biological man who identifies as a woman, serves as the U.S. Army Sustainment Commander Cyber Division Chief, G6 Information Management, according to the U.S. Army, which lauded Jones for living her truth, not the truth. You notice that it's always somebody else's truth. It's not reality. It's not the truth. It's not the facts. It's just their truth, her truth, his truth, they truth. I mean, all this stuff. Well, check out this messaging from the Department of Defense. You guys ready? They put out a tweet. Quote, her journey from battling depression and suicidal thoughts to embracing authenticity inspires us all. I don't know if that's inspirational of somebody having suicidal thoughts or battling depression. I mean, if they overcame it, obviously that's an amazing thing. And if you're battling depression or suicidal thoughts, please call a hotline or somebody close to you because we genuinely care about you, regardless of whether you're trans or part of the LGBTQ community. Whoever you may be, it doesn't matter. If you're battling something as severe as depression or suicidal thoughts, please call a hotline or get in touch with somebody or even email me. We care about you. We love you, regardless of political affiliation. We're all Americans here. But look, this might be contentious to some of us in the community, and I hope it isn't. But I don't really care if you're gay or lesbian and you're part of the military. I'm sure those that were storming on D-Day, right? Storming the beaches of Normandy or Omaha or whatever beach it was, I'm sure one or a few had to have been gay or lesbian, or mostly just gay because it's mostly just men. But look, it's fine as long as you're willing to serve this country. I think you get in a little bit of dicey territory when you get into the realm of identity, meaning trans, because then you're kind of morphing reality. And when you're morphing reality, and maybe those that are actually part of the military could speak to this in the comment section or live chat, when you're morphing reality, I feel like that's getting into a little bit of dicey territory for me sitting next to the dude in the trenches. Now, I'm not part of the military, so I don't know, but I imagine a lot of you don't really care if somebody's gay or lesbian as long as they're willing to do what they need to do in that time of battle. You have somebody here saying the major should be removed from service and encouraged to seek help. You are charged with preparing, fighting, and winning our nation's wars, not a social convalescence organization. You are failing in your sacred duty. Dana Lausch said, what the hell is your purpose anymore? So I think we're hitting a little bit hard here, and rightfully so. If this person's still struggling with depression and suicidal thoughts, I'm not sure if they should be leading people. But again, those that are in the military, you let me know in the comment section. Even though I'm not in the military, I think I still have a right to give my opinion on the damn thing, though. Another person said, all you should be concerned about is defending the country. This BS is stopping good people from joining the military. I don't know if it's that stopping people from joining the military. The military's recruitment numbers are at an all-time low. Partly, yes, it's due to them pushing this woke agenda. But part of it, too, is just people don't have the physique anymore to get in the military. People can't do push-ups. The American culture right now is so obese, it is head spinning. People just can't get in. You also have this person saying, why does this person have a plush animal with a symbol on their desk? So for those that are listening on Audible, there is some sort of plushie toy that kind of looks like something from Disney, but it also says she/her. So now we're getting into the realm of pushing this woke ideology, which has happened or has been happening for some time now in our military, which I'm not for. You've had you have generals like Mark Milley pushing this stuff and others. I mean, the Secretary of Defense as well. I don't know why they need to inject this diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, this woke ideology indoctrination into our military that's supposed to bring people together, not be dividing people. But hey, that's what the LGBTQ community does. It literally divides people. The Democrat Party and the progressive left literally divide people. That's why you have black-only graduations. I mean, they're splitting and segregating people in colleges. It is wild. The U.S. Army quotes Master Resilience Trainer Stephanie Aller, speaking of LGBTQ plus veterans and soldiers, quote, who have concealed their true selves. Imagine having to conceal your true self every day for an extended period or maybe even your entire life. How many of us could do that? Since getting into therapy, I was able to detangle my feelings about being transgender and disconnect it with being evil and the suffocating shame. I started to accept and love myself. That's great and all, but again, how about we not espouse this type of stuff in the military and get along with one another, which I am for. But when you're pushing this ideology that, in my opinion, is destructive, if it's destructive as a culture, my curiousness is it destructive then in our military and kind of dissolving what makes our military great? And even more than any of that, the public image of it is not a good thing. Think about the aspect of another country looking into the American military and going, what is wrong with these people? Is that where the American military is at? Where men think that they're women and women think that they're men? And they're just out. You have the Department of Defense boasting about, hey, oh, look at this person was suicidal and they have depression. And look where they are now. Now they think that they're a woman when actually they're a biological male. Like, does that look good for our country? That doesn't seem very strong. And then you're backed up by a president that trips over sandbags, trips up a flight of stairs, falls downstairs, hits a golf ball backwards, roams around the White House, can't follow the Secret Service to his Oval Office. I mean, it's thing after thing. He's on oxygen, possibly. We've heard rumors that Jill Biden is giving him medicine, shooting him up full of dope before he gets on these major speaking engagements. I mean, there's thing after thing. I mean, none of this I have to imagine looks good. And that's my biggest problem with all of this. Is not that the person's trans, not that the person's part of the LGBTQ community, but it's the woke ideology that tends to be divisive and divides people. And lastly, just the optics of it all doesn't look good when you're supposed to be the most powerful military that God's ever created in human existence. And now you got people wanting to switch genders or switch sexes, however you want to phrase it. They're both the same thing. Quote, the United States military is the greatest fighting force in the world. It is also one of the most humble and sacrificial the world has ever known, the report stated. Unfortunately, President Joe Biden and his administration are weakening America's warfighters through a sustained assault fueled by woke virtue signaling. Our military's singular purpose is to provide for the common defense of our nation. It cannot be turned into a left-wing social experiment. It cannot be used as a cudgel against America itself, and it cannot be paralyzed by fear of offending the sensibilities of Ivy League faculty lounges and progressive pundits. The only goal of our special forces should be effectiveness. Every other consideration must be subordinate to and in service of that end. Forcing our military to engage in DEI trainings encourages supporting and advancing people on criteria other than competence and ability to carry out the mission. Way better than how I phrased it, but look, a part of that, they didn't explicitly say this, but again, encourages supporting and advancing people on a criteria other than competence and ability to carry out a mission. In there, you can read the words of, how about not creating division? Because when you create division within the military, I would imagine things go south. Again, as somebody that wasn't in the military, but has a lot of friends that were, family members in the military in World War II, both on destroyers, Pearl Harbor, my father again was on a destroyer. And none of this, according to them, is a good thing. So let me know what you think about that one in the comment section below. This one is head spinning, folks. TCU, also known as Texas Christian University, now offers, quote, the queer art of drag as an academic course. This is where our universities are going. This is where your hard-earned money is going, folks. When you give it to your child, they're going to be taking drag courses now. I'm laughing because this is so insane. When I say, hey, somebody majored in lesbian dance theory, I mean, it is a little bit of a joke, but satire isn't too far from being reality now that the progressive left are roaming around in this world. Seeing it in real time. First, it was reading books to children. Then it was dressing in religious garb. Now it's become a subject worthy of academic study. If you are a student at TCU, you can earn actual college credit for taking a class titled The Queer Art of Drag, which is unsurprisingly offered by the Department of Women and Gender Studies. Oh, God. Now, there's a reason why that study came out. And for the first time in 100 years, IQ score of Americans has dropped. You're seeing why. In this class, students create their own drag persona and explore how such personas contribute to queer world making. Somebody wrote this. Somebody came up with this course. Oh, that's good. I'm not going to get through this. Oh, that's good. Pat Gray sarcastically remarks, we're trying to make a queer world. Look, they've been doing it for a while. They're trying to trans your kids. Of course, they're trying to make a queer world. That's why there's a massive exponential spike in people that identify part of the LGBTQ community. Anytime any school has a Department of Gender Studies, weird things are going on or going to be on in that department every time. The course is taught by Dr. Nino Testa, whose drag name is Maria Von Clapp. Okay. And is designed to, quote, challenge dominant norms and systems of oppression. Oh, okay, sure it is. Sure. Tell me this is only one college credit. I don't know. It might be a 3-unit course, maybe a 4. There might be a lab involved where you actually get to dress up as a drag and start doing weird things in polls and maybe go to local high schools and middle schools and perform for the little kids because, hell, that's what the LGBTQ community is doing nowadays. At least these progressive activists. I want to make a distinction. When I say the LGBTQ community, I'm using like kind of broad terms. I'm specifically talking about the progressive left. Sometimes you'll hear me say Democrat Party. Just know for the followers and the audience of the Bald Brad Show, when I say Democrat Party or I say progressive left or the LGBTQ community on the show, we're strictly talking about the left here. When I say Democrat Party, there's pockets in the Democrat Party that are leftist. They don't believe in your freedom of speech. They don't believe in the First Amendment. They don't believe in the freedom of the press or freedom of religion. They don't believe in the Second Amendment. They don't believe in the Constitution. That's the progressive left that I'm talking about. These are these woke leftist libs that want to destroy this country. So just to be specific, that's what I'm referring to. So when I use broad terms, please know in the back of your mind, always talking about just the left. Because there are Democrats out there that actually do believe in freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, the right to assembly, all those things, the Second Amendment. They do believe in that and they try to uphold it. But there are, again, pockets of the Democrat Party that are progressive left woke libs, like socialists like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Ilhan Omar, those types of people that want to destroy this country from the inside out and doing everything they possibly can to do so. But let me know, folks, would you take a drag class at TCU? Would you take a drag class in general? Doll yourself up in some pigtails? Maybe join the U.S. Army? Because supposedly now when you become trans, you inspire us all, folks. Can't make this up, man. Well, let's get some updates here on Bud Light. Well, the Bud Light fiasco with Dylan Mulvaney, where Bud Light lost over $20 billion. Yeah, not million, $1 billion, has left bottle companies going out of business. So this had massive ramifications, not just for Bud Light as a company, not just for Bud Light employees, but also those that supply Bud Light with bottles, glass bottles. So a glass bottling company impacted by Bud Light's botched promotion with transgender influence Dylan Mulvaney will close down 2 of its locations, laying off more than 600 employees as the beer brand continues to grapple with staggering financial losses and declining sales. There's a lot of videos coming out asking people what they're going to drink during 4th of July. Everybody's like, no, I'm not going to drink Bud Light. I'll find something else like Heineken or maybe a nice IPA, which I love personally. I love Stone. But what's also funny about this whole thing is Dylan Mulvaney came out finally with a video and kind of bashing Bud Light for not having his back. But I'm thinking like, dude, you just cost a company billions of dollars, like $20 billion. This company might never recover. You might have actually drove this company into the ground. And I shouldn't say he did it. Really, the company did it to themselves. They've been pushing this LGBTQ stuff for quite some time, for a lot of years. And we just kind of had enough of it, especially now that the LGBTQ community is targeting our children and going after them. So much so that California is pushing forth a bill that if you don't go with your child's gender identity that they want you to call them, he, her, she, them, they, them, Zer, all this other stuff, then what they could do is label that as child abuse and remove your child from your home. So if you didn't see yesterday's episode, I highly recommend you check it out because that one slipped through the cracks. Didn't know about that one, but if it's coming to California, could be coming to a state near you. Be on the lookout for that. So you have this group, this is called the RDAG Group, a global glass producer who contracts with the Anheuser-Busch Company, announced that they will be closing their plants in North Carolina and Louisiana in July. putting roughly 645 employees out of a job. The bottling company did not reveal the reason for the move, but an investigation by WRAL reportedly found that the plants are shutting because of the tanking Bud Light sales, as retailers, distributors, and bars and contracted companies feel the wrath of nationwide boycotts over the controversial Bud Light partnership that celebrated Mulvaney's 365 days of girlhood. I mean, it's sad to see, but this is obviously reported on that Bud Light has ramifications into the glass producers, right? I get that whole aspect. But what I'm curious on is, I don't see too many glass bottles used that often. It seems like a lot of people are going to aluminum or just the cans. And so I'm curious into the decline that's been happening even before this took place with these glass bottle companies. Also curious on, when we would go do reviews or compilations when I was an accountant for public and private companies, and we kind of create their financial sheets for them or their financial documents, whether that's a P&L statement or, their assets and liabilities, their balance sheet, is some things we would try to identify for them. And one of those things that we would identify is kind of the proportion of sales you'd have with specific companies. And a lot of times if, this glass company, 50% was coming from Anheuser-Busch, that's one thing that we would highlight to that company, saying, there's a lot of risk involved, because if something were to happen with Anheuser-Busch, then most likely you're going to cripple as a company. And I'm curious to see how much of their sales or their revenue was from Anheuser-Busch buying product from them. And I imagine it's a lot, and enough to actually close down 2 plants. So you can't put all your eggs in one basket. But like I said, I mean, if not many people are buying glass bottles anymore, I would imagine that Anheuser-Busch was mostly, if not all, their business. So you have an internal Agar Group member obtained by WRAL executives said that they plan to shut down the 2 plants due to slow sales with Anheuser-Busch. Well, there you go. If it's coming from the inside, then obviously that's what's going on. Longtime employees told the outlet that they were not surprised by the move, considering that a large part of their business at those plants was producing bottles for Budweiser and Bud Light, or in other words, Anheuser-Busch. So that just gives credibility to exactly what I've talked about. Again, if anybody's a new listener to the Bald Brad Show, we don't read these articles beforehand. You get a real-time reaction, and I kind of just pull whatever I know and give my opinion on everything. And we get to join as a community and have fun together in the live chat. Again, hit that join tab down here. Become a true American Patriot today. We would love to have you, folks. We would love to have you. Look, we're all patriots here. We're drinking out of the mugs. We're having coffee. I know some of you got to be drinking some whiskey in these Bidenomics, man. The economy ain't doing well. That's why you got stuff like this happening. You also have just every company firing people left and right, whether that's Disney for their woke ideology, or that's, Microsoft, Amazon for whatever they're pushing as well, getting rid of people. I mean, there's thousands of firings across the board. McDonald's getting rid of like 100,000 people. Quote, because of Budweiser no longer selling the bottle, they no longer needed our product. Well, yeah. I mean, nobody's buying them. When we did the Bud Light commercial ad that they recently displayed, they had this girl trying to push closed the refrigerator because it was jam-packed full of Bud Light, and I was laughing because you couldn't get more of a symbolic image of what that party's going to be like, because nobody at that party is going to drink Bud Light. You actually had somebody do this. You had somebody bring an ice box full of a variety of beers, and at the end of the night, the only thing that was left over was Bud Light. Nobody wants to drink it. Why? Because people don't want people targeting their kids. Plain and simple. Leave the kids alone. But that's the recent development in the Bud Light series, other than Dylan Mulvaney getting upset, Bud Light not coming out in the open and apologizing to their consumers, which they said, we hear you. No, you don't. No, you don't. You had the CEO, amidst all this backlash, still go, yeah, we're still going to support Pride events. I mean, he's not getting it. He's not getting it. So you don't get it. You go woke, you go broke. That's going to be the result of it. Well, moving into the recent Supreme Court decisions, you have a couple opinion pieces here that I want to break down for you. Both are going to be from The Guardian, which we used to do on the Bald Brad Show. We used to break down opinion pieces and kind of go, what the hell are you talking about, from these progressive leftists? So the Supreme Court just threw millions of American student debtors under the bus. No, they didn't. They didn't. It's funny how they do this, because as I've always mentioned, the Democrat Party, specifically the progressive left, let's be specific, does not have personal responsibility. It is not the responsibility of the government to pay off your debt. It is your responsibility. It is not the American taxpayer's responsibility, again, to pay off your debt. You took out that debt. You know the consequences of it. With any debt comes risk. So the government, no, didn't let you down. You let yourself down. And you really let yourself down if you're silly enough to actually think the government would bail you out. Last August, President Biden did something no president has done before. Gee, why would that be? I don't know. Probably because it's against the Constitution. It's illegal. It's an overreach of power. That's why no president has ever done it, because it's crazy. But leave it up to the Democrats. Leave it up to Biden to do something crazy because his head ain't working. And you know what? I'm curious if Biden really put this forth and he came up with it. And the reason why I say that is because they're rebranding the Biden economy. They're calling it Bidenomics. Joe Biden himself didn't even know this. He was not aware of it. He talked about how he just saw it on TV. He saw Bidenomics on TV. And he's like, oh, what's going on? That's how involved or uninvolved Joe Biden is in anything. He's not running the show. So I'm curious, I guarantee you some woke lib came up with this in the Biden administration. Joe Biden knew nothing about it. And then they announced it to everybody, and Joe Biden had to go along with it to pretend like he's actually running the show. I think that's really what happened here. He announced a plan to mass cancel student debt, offering $10,000 to $20,000 of relief for borrowers who earn under $125,000 annually. The White House saying, well, most of these people are making less than $75,000 a year. That's a lot of money. You're making $75,000 a year. The triumph of this policy was more than the silver of debt that has potentially sliced off the second largest type of household debt in the U.S. More fundamentally, Biden's policy proposal put an ideological dent in the American doctrinal belief that a creditor's right to repayment is the first order business of an economy. On Friday, in a 6-3 vote on ideological lines, the U.S. Supreme Court undid all of that. The court ruled against Biden's student loan forgiveness policy and put millions of Americans' financial futures in peril. No, they didn't. They put themselves in financial peril. They knew what they were getting themselves into, and if they didn't, that is not my fault. I feel bad for them. But you are given an amortization schedule. You should know what that career is going to pay when you're going to get out of that career or that college, whatever you're going to go do. You should know how much it's going to pay. There's a rule of thumb. You should never take out a loan that's more than your starting salary of your first year of that career. So, for example, if I was going to make, say, $50,000 as an accountant, let's just say, and I went and took out a $75,000 student loan, that's called a no-no. And you can't blame it of, well, nobody told me. How about you do some research before you take out a serious risk like any sort of loan that you're going to have to pay back? And you shouldn't expect somebody else to pay off what you owe. But that's what these libs want. They don't want any personal responsibility. It's always somebody else's fault. And now, whose fault is it? Now it's Joe Biden's fault. Partially is because you made a promise you couldn't keep. Mostly it's on the individual. Debt intensifies existing inequalities in our society. Here we go with the racist argument. Here we go. Those who have the least rely on debt the most for everything from housing to healthcare to higher education. Debtors end up paying higher cost for the same goods than those who could pay cash up front. Black people and women bear the highest student debt burdens. There you go. I told you they're going to bring it. I have not read this. I told you. You could just tell by the language. Black people and women bear the highest student debt burdens over time. They pay a higher sticker price for the same degrees as white people and men. For these reasons, Biden's proposed plan was also an attempt to chip away at the racial wealth gap. There you go. We talk about the wealth gap in our book, Children Horse How the Left is Destroying America. Get yourself a copy today. But look, you took out the debt. It's pure simple. You have personal responsibility to pay that off. Regardless of whatever oppression you want to say is out there, some sort of systemic racism out there, which, again, the best case for systemic racism was affirmative action, where you screwed over the Indians and the Asians and the whites as well. That's the best argument for it, but that's done away with. So now there's really no systemic racism, but they're still going to peddle this stuff. It was no wonder then that within weeks of Biden's policy announcement, half a dozen right-wing lawsuits sued to stop the president's program because it was illegal. You couldn't do it. It was an overreach. They don't understand how government works. Although most of the suits were thrown out, two stuck and temporarily halted the program. Late last fall, Biden requested the U.S. Supreme Court intervene, although there had been much hand-wringing about the student debt case in front of the court. Its role as a bargaining chip in debt ceiling negotiations, its prospect to drive voters to the polls in 2024, most of the discussions missing the point. Yeah, the point was that it was an overreach of the executive branch to put forth something like this, where they were going to use the HEROES Act, and we read what the HEROES Act was, where during a time of war or a military operation or a national emergency, you could have the debt relieved of soldiers who were forced to leave college to go and protect our country during a time of war, military conflict, or a national emergency. And what they were going was, well, COVID-19. Okay, well, there is no COVID-19 anymore. Biden himself said that the pandemic was over. So what's your argument here? Unless you're talking about soldiers, then I'm all for because they're actually making a sacrifice and sacrificing the greatest, their life, to go protect our freedoms. But it's not about the soldiers. It's clearly, as you saw here, it was about to chip away at the racial wealth gap between blacks, Hispanics, whites, Asian, Indians, and all that stuff. That's the truth about it, which we covered in an episode just last week. That's because the Supreme Court case in question was not actually about whether the president can cancel debt. It was about whether the plaintiffs in the case, 6 Republican attorney generals, watch this spin. They're going to spin it now. It had nothing to do with the debt. It had nothing. I'm sorry. It's so insane, the spin. 6 Republican attorney general could reasonably prove that canceling millions of people's student debt harms their state and whether judges would believe their lies. The state of Missouri contended that it will be harmed because a quasi-public loan servicing company there, Mohela, may lose revenue from cancellation, moving it more difficult for Mohela to repay an old debt owed to the state of Missouri. But that violates a basic legal principle. You can't sue on behalf of somebody else. My roommate can't sue my employer for laying me off and making it harder for me to pay half my rent, yet this case would set such a precedent. Well, I mean, again, somebody else is not liable and responsible for your debt at the end of the day. But again, I know you don't believe in personal responsibility, and by you, I'm talking about this author here. It's wild how they just flipped this whole thing. Oh, it wasn't about the debt. It was about some other reason. No, it was about an overreach. That's what it was. You can't use the HEROES Act, plain and simple, but they were trying to do it. They were trying to scuffle this whole thing. And so because they didn't get their way, the Biden administration releases the latest student loan plan after SCOTUS blocks handout. So because they didn't get their way, they're going to find some loosey-goosey thing, some roundabout way that they can get their way at the end of the day. So the Biden administration on Friday announced a new student loan debt initiative following the Supreme Court decisions blocking more than $400 billion handout plan. After the Supreme Court's decision was issued, it took them less than a couple hours to have the Department of Defense announcing that it will revise its new income-driven repayment IDR plan to reduce borrowers' payments and provide an on-ramp intended to help borrowers struggling to resume repayment. Earlier today, the Department of Education finalized our new income-driven repayment plan, saving on a valuable education, save. I'm sure they were all giddy about that whole thing. Oh, you came up with save. Oh, saving on a valuable education. We just got done talking about how Texas Christian University is giving out drag classes as academic credit. What value of education are you talking about? I mean, these gender studies are head spinning. What value are you giving there? There's a reason why people are coming out of college with no job prospects, because they have women and gender study majors. Like, who's going to hire you other than woke libs? Nobody. You graduated in lesbian dance theory and you're trying to become a CEO, or you're baffled that somebody's not going to pay you $200,000 a year going, well, they're racist. There's oppression out there. Nobody's going to hire me. Yeah, because your major sucked. You wasted 4 years of your life dressing up as a drag queen and doing underwater basket weaving and coming out with a gender identity queer theory study major. I mean, this is how dumb these people are. But, save. Yeah, save. Saving on a valuable education. Yeah, it's valuable. That's for sure. Now your rate of return sucks, but you're going to blame it on the government. Now you're going to blame Joe Biden because you didn't get your debt paid off. And then you're going to blame it on oppression and, the racial wage gap and all this other stuff. You're harming black people and Asians and whites or whatever the hell you're going to spew. This comes from the Secretary of Education, Miguel Cardona. He said this: it will cut monthly payments to $0 for millions of low-income borrowers, save all other borrowers at least $1,000 per year, and stop runaway interest that leaves borrowers owing more than their initial loan. I mean, that's usually how interest works. I mean, how is a person that's taking all the risk to give you the money supposed to get their money back? Obviously, it's going to be more than the initial loan. Finally, the department is providing a 12-month on-ramp transition period that will help ensure borrowers smoothly and successfully return to repayment without falling into delinquency or default. Borrowers who can make payments should do so, as payments will resume and interest will accrue. But the on-ramp to repayment will help borrowers avoid the harshest consequences of missed, partial, or late payments, like negative credit reports and having loans referred to collection agencies. So you screwed up. Some of you, not you in general, but just some people, sat there and go, oh, well, I'm gonna bank on the government, the Biden administration, to pay off my loan, so I'm just not going to do so. So because they sat there and made a promise, they screwed up on their end. They were so giddy about this whole forgiveness plan getting through that they didn't even have a plan B. And so when Plan B has to be initiated, they go, oh crap, we don't have it set up yet. We still have to create the whole ruling, which comes from the actual White House that we covered in the White House press briefing. They don't even have it set up yet. And they're expecting a different outcome of the Supreme Court to rule on that case. Is that because they screwed up, now they go, oh, because we screwed up and we promised you something, we couldn't keep that promise. Now because you waited and didn't pay off anything, we're going to let that kind of underskirt and go under the rug so that you don't get screwed and so your credit's not hurt or anything like that. Because these people are banking on it. Go, well, I'm just not going to pay off my loan. I'm just not going to bank the payments because I'm going to get all this money and I'm going to get my debt relieved. And that also has been time and time again a question, a common theme on Dave Ramsey's radio show about financial advice, personal finance to be specific, about, hey, should I continue to pay off my loans if I'm going to get this handout? No, you should pay off your loans. You shouldn't have loans in the first place if you can avoid them. Yeah, you should pay them off. Don't bank on the government for anything. If you're relying on the government, you're a knucklehead. I'm sorry, knucklehead. Don't expect a bailout from anybody. You got to worry about yourself. Don't expect anything from anybody else. The Education Department's SAVE plan will revise the existing revised pay-as-you-earn called REPAY. Again, with these acronyms, man, I'm telling you, somebody's all giddy that they came up with this stuff. Income-driven repayment plan, when it takes effect, borrowers who are enrolled in the REPAY plan will be automatically transitioned into the SAVE plan without having to take action. Several changes to the IDR plan will take effect this year before the end of the student loan repayment pause, although the regulation is scheduled to take full effect on July 1st, 2024, so about a year from now. Check this out. Among the changes in the meantime before repayment resumes will be an increase in the amount of income protected from repayment calculations, as the protected income threshold will rise from 150% of the federal poverty guidelines to 225%. The Education Department estimates this means a single borrower earning less than $32,000 annually, or $67,000 for a family of four, won't have to make any payments, and that change will make 1 million additional borrowers eligible for a zero payment. Now, I believe they're still going to have to pay it back. You're just delaying the inevitable, which is not any good financial advice for anybody. I mean, I understand if you have a family of four and you're struggling to pay off, childcare or whatever it is. I fully understand that. But you got to start thinking about having multiple jobs. I mean, even if you're both full-time workers, again, you have a family, start thinking about maybe one of you starting to get an extra job here on the weekend to help, pay down those credit cards or whatever it may be. You got to make some sort of change. You can't rely on the government. You can't trust the government whatsoever. Well, moving into the next Supreme Court decision, you have affirmative action is over in the United States, but only for black people. So again, this comes from The Guardian. This is an opinion piece, and it's an opinion piece about race. Always about race with these Democrats and leftists, man. Affirmative action, as we know it, is officially over. Thank God, because it was a racist implementation and policy. It was racist. You were screwing over Asians, whites, and Indians and others. And what you were also doing is screwing over black people because they were going into institutions that they were not qualified to be in any case. And so their grades were lower. The dropout rate was higher for blacks. They weren't succeeding in the same rates that they would be if they went to a different institution. There's a great book, again, by Heather McDonald and others. Check it out. All about affirmative action. We talk about affirmative action in the book, Trojan Horse, How the Left is Destroying America. Get yourself a copy today, folks. Great part in the book. A lot of stats, a lot of information. So the U.S. Supreme Court ruled this week what race can no longer be considered as a factor in university admissions, and the left are losing their mind over it. And just to be clear, affirmative action as a whole isn't canceled. It's just the race part that the court is gutting. Oh, it's just the race part. God. Screw Martin Luther King's words. Screw others. We want race involved, according to Democrats. It's all about race. Isn't that insane, you guys? the whole civil rights movement to remove race and segregation, all those things. And now you have the Democrat Party and the progressive left wanting to have all black graduations, segregate student dorms between blacks, whites, and others. You can't make it up. And now they're losing their minds over this stuff because they don't get their way. They can't have their racist policies implemented. Oh, affirmative action has always been divisive. Gee, I wonder why. But two recent cases involving Harvard and the University of North Carolina are what finally killed it. The court ruled against both universities, siding with an organization called Student for Fair Admissions, who argued that race-conscious admissions at American universities constituted a violation of Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the part that bars discrimination based on race, color, or national origin. Sounds like a good thing to me, to sit there and not allow that stuff to be implemented. But you had some psychos in the past who were like, oh, let's base it on race. It's pretty obvious why the racial portion of affirmative action is important. It wasn't until the mid-1950s that school segregation was finally outlawed. But the Democrats still want that. That's why they want to segregate dorms. They want to segregate some classrooms, which we've heard about in the past of teachers doing. You want them to have segregation and graduation at these universities. But contrary to popular perception, affirmative action isn't just a get-in-free card for Black post-secondary students. People with disabilities, and other historically marginalized groups have all benefited from the court's recognition that circumstances beyond their control may exclude them from these institutions. But much like welfare, public housing, and other social programs created to help all vulnerable people, but you weren't helping all vulnerable people. Black students were made the poster child for affirmative action. They were made the poster child because of what you were saying and what the data shows. I mean, Asians had to score higher in the SAT and ACT by like 275 points above blacks to get into the same institution. How is that fair? How is it not discrimination? How is it not racist? I'm laughing because it's so wild they don't see it. Perhaps the most sinister end result of this racial stereotyping is the way it successfully pits Black and Asian communities against each other. Because it does. Because it does. The racist discourse around affirmative action teaches Asian students that they are being disadvantaged in college admissions in favor of Black students. Yes. I think Asian people would agree with that. That's why they're so stoked about it, that it's finally gone, that they're not getting screwed over. I mean, there was originally a Harvard case back in the day, even before this one, that talked about Asians. Asians sued Harvard based on the same idea. As such, the myth of model minority, who plays by the rules and has pulled themselves up by the bootstraps, has made many Asian Americans complicit in white supremacy strategies of anti-Blackness, mass fairness. Oh my God. See how that works? You can't have grit anymore. If you work hard, you get screwed over, but because you got screwed over, somehow you're complicit in white supremacy now because you're the one that got screwed over, even though you worked hard, you get a higher SAT score, you had better qualifications, but some other guy, because of their race, got in before you did. But now, because you didn't get in, and now you're pissed about it, because of the affirmative action, now you're white supremacist. See how that works? Oh my God. Quote, "Today's a great day for Asian Americans and all Americans." This comes from the president of the Asian American Coalition for Education, told BBC about the court's decision. "This decision will preserve meritocracy, which is the bedrock of the American dream." 100% agree. Zhao, who again is the president of that Coalition of Education, is grasping here for something that simply doesn't exist. Meritocracy doesn't exist. So American meritocracy is a myth that was crafted by powerful to excuse the role in inequality. There you go. There you go. It's always something. You guys, this is the same language that we saw MSNBC push, CNN and others have pushed, where they think Black people can't compete against any other race. That is so racist to me. That is so insane. If you're Black, you 100% can compete. If you just work hard, you grind, you may not be given the same exact, what's the word I'm looking for? Maybe same exact like textbooks or technological advancements, maybe as Asians, whites, Hispanics. And it can be flip-flop, by the way. You can have Black people get more technological or better textbooks or better education than some whites and Hispanics and Asians. I mean, it goes both ways. You still have to grind and work hard to be successful and outcompete somebody else. You're in a world of competition. You can't have strict fairness across the board on every single aspect. And by the way, just because affirmative action's gone doesn't mean you're going to have fairness across the board. Some people's backgrounds and how they overcame certain obstacles, which is meritocracy, how you pulled yourself from the bootstraps and overcame those obstacles, will help you get into that university as long as you meet the basic qualifications. Grade, right? Extracurriculars, whatever it may be. But according to them, it's just all about oppression. It's all about race. Work hard and you can have anything you want. Well, that's not true. I can work as hard as I want to be in the NBA, but I'm not tall enough. I probably don't have the skills. I can work really, really hard. Doesn't mean it. I played hockey for over 25 years. I worked really, really hard. I played almost 7 days a week, which is why I don't play hockey that much anymore. I was really good. I didn't get in the NHL, didn't get drafted, right? All these, I mean, you can work really hard, but it doesn't mean you get anything you want. Come on, that's silly. Also did acting for a lot of years. I'm not like a famous actor. But what they really mean is to say, ignore all these socio-political realities that make life harder for some people so that we don't have to talk about what it makes it easier for others and how the two are, basically they're linked together. Again, not everybody's situation is different. And everybody's saying, remove the race part of it and have the meritocracy as well as your life that was evolved of how you overcame certain obstacles, whether you were poor or you're in an underprivileged area or in a high needs school or whatever it was, and how you overcame that with a good GPA and how you outcompeted maybe somebody else, regardless of their race and their living situation. As we've always said in accounting, when we're sitting there looking at resumes, you would have to have a base GPA just to get looked at, say like a 3.5 GPA, or else we're just going to literally throw your resume in the trash. But beyond that, regardless of with nothing to do with your race, is that say there was a 4.0 kid, say like a whatever it may be, 4.0. You got a 4.0 guy that had no work experience, just sat in college and just studied his butt off. But then you had somebody else that had, say, the bare minimum 3.5, but was working 2 jobs, maybe had a family, and had that experience. And you could clearly see that, well, they couldn't spend all their time studying. They couldn't spend all their time having a 4.0. So it makes sense why they have a 3.5, and they overcame a lot of obstacles to even get their name into the firm in the first place. You're going to more likely take that dude that overcame obstacles, worked really, really hard, worked their butt off to get a decent GPA, meet the requirements to get into that institution, over that person that just did nothing and just studied their entire time. There's no grit involved in that. They just studied it. They maybe had their education paid for it or not, but you understand there's going to be differences in all this stuff. Meritocracy, pull yourself over the bootstraps, overcome. They don't believe in that. They don't believe in it. So what happened was now you have these activists coming out and they're angry about the affirmative action ruling, as you're seeing. And partly I actually agree with what they're about to say here. And somebody asked me this question in the comment section about a day or two ago when we covered the affirmative action being donezo by the Supreme Court. And this has to do with legacy admissions. I don't agree with legacy admissions. And that's what I wrote to the person, because it's linear logic. Just because you have a legacy of family going into an institution should not put you above everybody else of thus getting in an institution, because it's kind of the same idea of affirmative action. So I think that your qualifications of what you are as an individual is what should get you into the institution. Nothing to do with race, nothing to do with anybody around you, everything to do with you overcoming obstacles, having the correct qualifications to get into the institution in the first place. Just because your friends, your grandparents, your parents themselves, or whoever that you're linked to in terms of your lineage, shouldn't just automatically set you above somebody else in terms of getting that institution. So I'm actually kind of maybe for what they're about to say here. Let's see. Civil rights activists angered by the Supreme Court striking down affirmative action and college admissions are suing Harvard over legacy admissions, arguing the practice gives mostly white children of wealthy alumni an advantage over minorities. I'm sure in the data that's true, but you don't need to necessarily bring race into it. I mean, that whole coin could be flipped towards any race, Asians, Hispanics, blacks. I mean, for example, let's talk about Howard University, primarily a black university. Was that Washington, D.C., Virginia, or something like that? I used to do a Bible study on that campus. Let's say that there was legacy admissions there. Primarily, you would probably, because it's a black primarily institution, not saying there's not whites there, because they're far and few between, let me tell you. But you could have that legacy admissions there were predominantly because somebody was black, or their parents, grandparents, that they're going to get in, and you'd expect them probably to be black as well, versus a white kid that never had any parents that went there would be chosen not over that black kid because of their legacy admissions. So you could have the coin flip, but they always are one-sided. They're always like blinders on. They don't apply it to different situations. I don't like legacy admissions. I don't think there should be a thing. After the High Court ruled against the race-based admissions policy at Harvard and University of North Carolina last week, Lawyers for Civil Rights, a Boston nonprofit, filed a lawsuit Monday on behalf of the Black and Latino communities in New England, alleging Harvard's legacy admissions violate the Civil Rights Act. It's interesting how all of a sudden they're into like, well, now that that's a thing, well, maybe we should do this too. Yes, you're exactly right. But the difference is one's based on legacy, which I don't agree with. The other one's based on race, primarily about race. Race should not be involved in anything whatsoever. Why are we rewarding children for privileges and advantage accrued by prior generations? This comes from the executive director at the Lawyer for Civil Rights. Your family's last name and the size of your bank account are not a measure of merit and should have no bearing on the college admissions process. Yes, correct. Just now, okay, we got that. Let's apply that to affirmative action, which we just talked about. Take that same exact logic and just carry over to that bin right there called affirmative action, and you're probably going to be good. Oh my God. From 2014 to 2019, Harvard had an acceptance rate of 6%, but enrolled 33% of legacy applicants and nearly 47% of applicants who were children of faculty or staff. Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid William R. Fitzsimmons defended the long-lasting practice in March, saying legacy status gives students a slight tip in the admissions process. I mean, those are pretty big disparities in terms of the statistics, so it's not a slight tip in terms of, the legacy and non-applicants that aren't legacy, a little bit more. But again, we'll move on here. Those who support affirmative action have argued that the race-based admissions policy helped counterbalance the Ivy League schools' legacy admissions, which critics say gives preference to the wealthy elite. A bipartisan chorus of politicians, including President Joe Biden and Senator Tim Scott, have called for an end to legacy admissions after the Supreme Court struck down affirmative action. So Tim Scott, again, is a Republican from South Carolina himself. So this kind of goes with Democrats and Republicans kind of coming together saying, look, this shouldn't be a thing. Biden urged universities to rethink legacy admissions, arguing that expand privilege instead of opportunity. During an appearance on Fox News, Senator Scott criticized admission policies that he says gives preferential treatment to certain people. Yes, but what the left will do is they'll take that and kind of try to cater it to their argument, because any sort of disparity they see in the data will give credence to some sort of oppression or some sort of discrimination or some sort of racism. So again, just because you get rid of legacy admissions does not mean you're still not going to have disparities. You can't have fairness across the board. That's not reality. But again, time and time again, we see the left throwing reality out the door, which is why I think men can become women and women can become men. Reality is not a thing anymore. We have to understand that. Once you start talking to these leftists, you'll realize that you're not talking to somebody that's dealing in the same realm of reality as you are. So preferential treatment, 100% agree. There should not be preferential treatment. You need to look at the merit. You need to look at every case individually and see if, one, they meet the minimum qualifications to get in that university, and then expand that and treat the competition as you should treat regular competition out there in the world. No discrimination, no racist stuff. Just have it be based on, again, the requirements. Quote, I think the question is, how do you continue to create a culture where education is the goal for every single part of our community? Well, you can't. You can't. Everybody's going to value something different. Everybody's going to value education at different levels of hierarchy. Some people's level of education is up here, and that's inherently built within their culture. If you look at the Asian community, it is not their race, it is their culture. There's different pockets of the Asian community throughout the world. And each community, each culture, each Asian pocket throughout the globe has a different community within itself. And that goes down to the individual. You know, there's a great book on this, is actually Thomas Sowell, Discrimination and Disparities. Because in the same household, you can have the same upbringing with the same two people. They can actually be twins, and they will have different hierarchies in terms of what they value. They'll have different prerequisites because of what they value. And those prerequisites of which they have, if they're lacking them, then one can move on and the other won't. You can actually have differences within the household itself. Even though the household gave the same opportunities to those same twins, but they valued something at different levels, or they treated something at different levels, which allowed one maybe to get into Harvard and the other one get into like a state school or whatever it may be. In the same household, it has everything to do with culture. And just because you have an Asian community, every Asian community does not have the same culture. Maybe in a holistic view, they do have overlappings if we do Venn diagrams and stuff. But at the end of the day, you have to look at the culture in the household of how that's being treated, and do they actually value education? And I guarantee you, not a lot of people value their education nowadays. They take it for granted. What I think the question is, how do you continue to create a culture where education is the goal for every single part of our community? One of the things that Harvard could do to make that even better is to eliminate any legacy programs where they have preferential treatment for legacy kids, not allow for the professors, their kids, to come to Harvard as well. Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch also targeted legacy admissions in a concurring opinion after voting with conservatives after affirmative action, saying the process undoubtedly benefits white and wealthy applicants the most. And just because it does, that does not mean that inherently is the reason why you should get rid of it. Just because it benefits a certain race more than others, in the same way, what you saw with the statistics in terms of college admissions was you had Asians getting above any other race. So clearly Asians were benefiting from something to get implemented within or accepted within those institutions more than any other race. What was it? What were they doing that nobody else was doing? Maybe the value of education, the time spent studying, the culture that was in that household was different than Indian people, was different than white people, was different than black people. And by the way, the reason why I said it was household is because you can have an Asian household here that values education highly, makes sure their son or daughter studies at all hours, making sure that they're doing certain things so that they could get into Harvard, versus another Asian family that doesn't value education, that doesn't put in the time with their kids for various reasons that it may be. And so you're going to have a discrepancy in data, even in the same Asian community. By the way, again, we do talk about all this in the book, Trojan Horse How the Left is Short in America. We actually talk about household income as well, and we break that down. There's a whole chapter on disparities. Discrimination disparities. That is the title of the chapter in this book. I highly recommend you pick it up, folks. You will love it. A lot of you are asking for a part 2. Settle down. The book's only been out for 3 or 4 months, folks. Settle down. I love the enthusiasm. Let me know. Do you think legacy admissions should be a thing? Would love to hear your arguments in the comment section or live chat. Folks, if you're in the live chat, thank you so much. We're not done yet, but think about becoming a member today. A lot of you are regulars. A lot of you join us every single time. We're all waiting. What are you doing? Join us. Become a member. Become a true American patriot today. Last little bit of news. This is kind of breaking news that's happening today. Israel attacks Jenin in biggest West Bank incursion in 20 years. I gotta admit, I lack a lot of knowledge on Israel and the conflict with the Palestinian territory and the Palestinians themselves. So I'm just gonna kind of give you the information without giving much commentary or opinion on it, just because I really lack in knowledge, and that's my fault. I want to get more books on this and actually read up on what's going on with the conflict to have more of an understanding of both sides. I mean, what you're going to have here is you're going to have the media blaming Israel, and then you're also going to have some of the media and maybe even right or conservatives blaming the Palestinians and stuff like that. I mean, this conflict's been going on for freaking ever. So Israel's launched a major aerial and ground offensive into the occupied West Bank city of Jenin, its biggest military operation in the Palestinian territory in years, in what is described as an extensive counterterrorism effort. At least 8 Palestinians were killed and 50 injured, 10 seriously in the attack that began about 1 a.m. on Monday, and the death toll is likely to rise, according to the Palestinian Health Ministry. On Monday afternoon, Israeli sources suggested that they need at least another 24 hours to complete the operation, launching at least 10 drone strikes on buildings, a brigade of Israeli troops, suggesting about 1,000 to 2,000 soldiers backed by armored bulldozers and snipers on rooftops entered the city and its refugee camp, encountering fire from Palestinians after Israel informed the White House of its plans. The streets of Jenin were deserted on Monday except for crowds of people outside the nearest hospital watching the gun battles at the main entrance to the camp at the end of the street. Black smoke from burning tires and tear gas filled the air. Ambulances struggled to cross impromptu Israeli checkpoints. As explosions echoed around the city, calls to support the fighters rang out from loudspeakers and mosques. The White House said it defended Israel's right to security and was monitoring the situation on the West Bank closely. Oh, I bet they were with those satellites, man. Just zoomed right on in to see what's going on. Quote, "We have seen the reports and are monitoring the situation closely," White House spokesperson said. "We support Israel's security and right to defend its people against Hamas, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and other terrorist groups." I've heard kind of how Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and other terrorist groups function is that, say they're doing bombings, right? Say the Israelis are bombing the Palestinians, specifically Hamas and these Islamic terrorist groups. Well, what they will do is they will run inside these places of shelter, whether it's a hospital or it's a school, whatever it may be, where there's children or, civilians, and they will use that to hunker down. Or sometimes they'll actually put these terrorists on rooftops or, with ammos, mortars, or whatever it is in these areas, again, schools, hospitals. And then when the Israeli military goes after them and there's casualties, civilian casualties, then the Palestinians come out and all their supporters from Hamas to these, terrorist groups going, "Oh, look what the Israelis did." It's like, dude, you're using innocent people as cover and you're doing massive harm to the Israeli people. So this is where you get this conflict and this back and forth from. And I think it's kind of disgusting how these Islamic jihads and these terrorist groups and Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, sit there and utilize children, men and women, as shields, and they don't want to sit there and fight face to face. It's a little bit of my take, a little bit of what I heard. Britain's Prime Minister called on the Israeli military to exercise restraint. While we support Israel's right to self-defense, the protection of civilians must be prioritized. So again, it's tough to prioritize civilians when you have Hamas and these terrorist organizations sitting there using them as human shields. In any military operation, we would urge the Israel Defense Forces to demonstrate restraint in its operations and for all parties to avoid further escalation in the West Bank and Gaza. So I'm curious to know what you guys think about this. I mean, obviously this article is going to go back and forth between who's right and who's wrong. They're going to support one group over another. I'm not really sure what to think. I do know for a fact that Hamas, again, does use men, women, and children and schools and hospitals as human shields. But I want to know what you think about this conflict. It's been going on forever and ever. I got to say, historically, what I do know is, I believe it was Britain, was this World War I, World War II, somewhere around that realm, probably screwed up in their negotiations of which land should be given to who and how it should be divided. I mean, that probably should have settled a lot of it, but hell, and there's a lot of biblical and history that's behind this. I got to read up on it. Folks, that is the show today. Head over to baldbrad.com, get yourself some merch, get yourself a t-shirt, a hoodie. Get yourself a mug, folks. Bald Brad Show logo on the front. You got the American flag on the back. A lot of you are going to buy in the black one. Get yourself a copy, again, of Trojan Horse, How the Left's Turn America. A lot of what we talked about today, folks, you can find in this book. Equip yourself with arguments so you can defeat a leftist or a Democrat in any argument or conversation. Become a member today. We'd love for you to join. We're getting a lot of memberships. A lot of you are finally deciding to join, which is awesome because we are building a community here of conservatives and like-minded people. A lot of you are regulars. A lot of you say hello to one another. I love seeing that. We are a family. We are true Americans. Become a patriot today by hitting that join tab. And folks, I'll see you tomorrow here on the Brad Show.